here lately, it seems. Uh,
Indeed.
I'm happy though. I'm happy about it. I'm really happy about it. I've filled everyone in that this live stream will eventually be turned into an episode for the weird part with Vincent Treewell, and I'm happy to help in any way that I can to pull that off for you. I'll get you the audio from this, and you can do with it what you will.
Right.
Thanks for reaching out to me and getting the ball rolling on this. It'll be a fun little discussion because, admittedly, the year of 2022, I did not spend a lot of time broadly researching paranormal things. I was so tunnel visioned into the documentary stuff I'd been working on and the things that I had personally going on that I kind of shut off everything else because I was in sensory overload anyway. So I'm looking forward to some of these stories, man, and hopefully, like my reaction to some of these will be completely and honestly genuine because I probably haven't heard these stories yet. So I'm looking forward to it.
Excellent, excellent. As am I. Um, this can't possibly cover everything that happened in 2022. I just wanted to focus on a few that, well, actually, there's quite a few. We'll see the time we have, but some things that didn't get as much coverage as I thought they should have. I mean, we could spend 2 hours talking about just the whole UAP debacle,
Oh, sure.
or was it? But, the whole thing there, we could talk about that, but everybody's probably heard at least some about that.
Yeah.
There's just been a lot of strange things that happened this year, and I'd like to start by giving a lot of credit to Red Pill Junkie and the Daily Grail, because I go there every morning, and that's where I get my dose of weird news. And then an excellent publication from the UK called Fortean Times. That's
Yes.
still an old-fashioned. I'm glad you've heard of it. Yes,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
it's not super common, um, and I finally subscribed because the bookstore stopped carrying it. And it's a old-fashioned like print media magazine, but they cover stuff nobody else covers around the world, and it's very interesting. So
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of stuff comes from those two sources.
I
But
rely heavily on Lon Strickler's work with Phantoms and Monsters,
that's
mostly because
always great.
he's so involved with the Chicago Mothman, the Lake Michigan flying humanoids investigation, which is a soft spot in my heart because the Mothman has always been, my favorite thing, my first love of paranormal activity, so but yeah, man, I'm really looking forward to this. I wanna have my
Absolutely.
mind blown here tonight.
Oh, I'm pretty sure that'll happen. But yes, Lon Strickler, I will give him all the respect in the world. He does what he does. He was one of the first people to listen to me, and when I was talking about something that wasn't getting serious coverage, and that was a few years ago. That was the Milwaukee Lion, where there was a lion walking around the city of Milwaukee, and the local media was treating it as a big joke. But when there was a lion sighting, the police showed up with sniper rifles, and the DNR was there with tranquilizer guns. And it wasn't a joke then. There was really a lion in the city of Milwaukee for a week or two. And
Wow.
then it was gone. And you know, that was the first episode of the weird part, was to talk about liminal animals and creatures that, we know lions exist. That's not a big mystery. We can go see one at the zoo, but they shouldn't be walking the streets of a major city. And how does that happen? And the usual explanations that are rolled out about exotic pets that escaped and stuff doesn't ever really end up being followed up. And when I kind of looked into it further, it led to alien big cats over in the UK, and it
Yeah.
yet led to the Black Panthers in. I mean the animals, not the organization, but that's a totally different podcast.
Yep.
But the animals that can't exist in the southeast and in Appalachia, but yet people see them on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And any zoologist will tell you, well, we don't really, melanid cougars don't really exist in our world. They're extremely, extremely rare. People shouldn't be seeing them, but people see them all the time.
Yeah. People see him
And
here where I live a lot.
absolutely, remind me, where do you reside?
If you follow the Illinois-Indiana border, I'm about
Oh,
halfway
yes.
up on the Illinois side.
Okay,
the
okay,
land of
yes.
oil and corn.
Where they say that there shouldn't be any panthers, you know?
Absolutely, yeah.
And
Well, the
yet people see panthers, yes.
Nathan Isaac had brought forward the suggestion and having noticed the correlations between Black Panther sightings, alien big cat sightings, and Native American mounds. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird because we're not really known for having Native American mounds here in my area, but the proliferation of the stories of these Black Panthers roaming the woods of, where I live. Like my high school is even like our mascot was the Panthers. Like we were,
Wow.
you know what I mean? Like it's a thing.
Uh-huh.
And so I started digging into the mounds thing. And I guess just because there's so much farmland here, so many of these mounds that could have existed in this area would have been just plowed through and leveled. So looking into that, I started really digging into the areas closer to the Wabash River, which is like the defining marker between Illinois and Indiana, and thinking closer to the river, the geology is a little different, the geography is a little different. Maybe there's more going on closer to the river. And also, these mounds are notoriously built closer to rivers. So, not far from me, like within an hour, there is an Indiana state park that is a site of Native American mounds. They're not real well known, not very popular spot. Native Americans still, like their descendants, still have like dance rituals and things at this park, and I'm gonna go there for sure. And yeah, it's not that far. Like it's really close by. So then I was thinking, well, what about in Southern Illinois, where I just love so much? It's such a special place to me. I found this book. It's called Caverns of Crime. It's really about Cave in Rock, Illinois, and how it was like a river pirate den, and all these people were, conned and killed, and all this
Wow.
stuff. So in that book, there's a map of like the Shawnee Forest area, and there are several mounds that are listed on this map. So I'm adding them all to the list of places that I'm gonna go and check out, because that correlation between panthers and Native American mounds, and also like just tons of weird paranormal stuff, and these mounds, these earthworks that have been built. Like it's fascinating to me. I was just talking about that before I brought you on, about how I want to go to Cahokia this year as well.
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be awesome.
So yeah,
That's a sight to be seen. And, a lot of mounds were just mindlessly destroyed
sure.
in settlement, and we have quite a few in Wisconsin, but we've probably lost 80%. And so, I mean, we've lost a lot of stuff that won't be found, but the energies may still be there.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have pointed out that where you have mounds, you tend to have dogman sightings or
Hmm.
something similar there too,
Hmm.
and that there may be a connection there, that maybe the dogman or perhaps the panther is some sort of guardian of the mounds, has been suggested, and that does make sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. I've always kind of just thought it's just a manifestation of that energy that was put into these places, and that's just how it happens to appear to us. So
Hmm.
in various ways, not just panthers, but like you said,
Yes.
dogmen, Bigfoot, UFOs, all of that stuff.
Yes, yes.
It's all the same
So-
thing, man. It's all the
some
same thing.
sometimes it's, yes, the phenomena wearing different gear,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I guess the first thing that I had on kind of my list of weird stuff was that this is the 1 year anniversary, to the day, of a very Fortean event. It doesn't get much more Fortean than this. A well documented fish fall in Texarkana, Texas.
Yeah.
And this one, I mean, it happened. People took pictures of the fish. There was video going while it was happening, and fish were falling out of the sky. And I mean, they were only a few inches long, some smaller, some larger, but fish were coming out of the sky.
Yeah.
Now, and that didn't get the coverage that it should, because it's easy to be laughed off, but people, took photos, and there was video of it, and there were numerous witnesses. it was a thing that happened, and is still unexplained, and I have a feeling it's going to be unexplained for a good
Oh
long
yeah.
time. You
I
know,
don't want to know the explanation for these falls. You know what I mean? Like the meat shower, the frog falls, the fish falls. I don't want to know because it's so much fun to just, imagine it if you aren't there to see it. I
it.
actually almost died in Texarkana one time.
Oh, you can't just say that and then not give a little bit of the story.
Oh my
Do
gosh.
tell.
I was driving back home from Dallas
Uh-huh.
and it was a severe storm night. It was the middle of the night. And I think around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, the rain had gotten so bad I could barely see. I'm trying to drive down the interstate and I come over this overpass, like I'm on the top, and there's lane merging up from underneath as it would. And coming off of this overpass, it dips down into, a little valley before the lane joins. And I didn't see water like standing on the road. And I hit it, hydroplaned, spun around in a full circle on the interstate while a semi is merging on to my lane. Come to a complete stop. Luckily, nobody got hit. I was still facing the direction I had meant to be going, and I'm like, I can't do this anymore. This isn't cool. So I get to the next town. I pull over. I find like a Quality Inn. I get out of my car and I wade through the parking lot. Like there's over a foot of water standing in this parking lot, and I'm like, I need a room. I don't care what it is, what it costs, whatever. Like I'm not gonna die on this road tonight. And I get inside. I turn on the Weather Channel, and there had been 4 tornadoes like in every direction of where I was just moments ago. Like it was just total natural disaster going on down there. And I slept
Wow.
for a few hours and then I finished coming home, but it was pretty wild.
Yeah, you're lucky to be alive, my friend.
I
Wow.
know. I
That
know.
is wild.
Yeah.
I imagine they probably blame the fish on tornadoes or something like that,
Yeah.
but
Well, I'm assuming that that's what it was. It was a tornado that brought these fish.
selectively and nothing else, and not
Yes.
like the
Just,
rocks
just
and
this one
rubble
species.
and yeah, drop them just down there. It's an amazing behavior for a tornado,
Yeah. Incredible. They're intelligent. They're sentient. They just
know.
don't show it very often.
Yes, often the so-called explanation is harder to believe than just fish fell from the sky. You
Yeah.
know,
No, yeah, for sure.
you can't debunk something with that's harder to believe than the thing you're debunking.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, absolutely.
um,
So this is the what anniversary of this fish fall this year?
1 year
Just the
happened.
1 year anniversary?
Yes,
Okay,
exactly 1 year ago, but it
cool.
was known for being among the most well documented because there was video while it's happening.
Wow. Yeah.
And these minnows just seem to be dropping like out of the sky, and nothing other than water coming down with them.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, where would all the detritus be? Where would all the if you dip into the water and then drop it, you're getting a lot
Mhm.
more than just fish. You get sand and rocks and worms and what have you,
Yeah.
and weeds, and no, there's just fish.
Yeah, it's
And
really weird. It's like a glitch or something.
uh-huh.
So I had a really bizarre dream about
Uh-huh.
like fish falls. It was actually frogs, but same thing.
Mhm.
Um, you know how people like us are, we get into these rabbit holes and we're thinking about stuff all the time. I
Mhm.
must have just been really hard into thinking about frog falls for whatever reason. And I had a dream that I was shown why these things happen and that it is a simulation and that it is restocking the animals like back into the game, like
Mhm.
because they've reached a point where there need to be a restocking event, and so they just drop, and sometimes they don't go where they're supposed to go, and they just fall wherever it is, wherever it happens to be. And it happens more often than we know, but we don't know it because it falls where it's supposed to. So we only catch the ones that are anomalous or whatever. That was the dream, and I woke up and I was like, wow, that's crazy, because I don't believe in the simulation theory
I
so
don't
much.
either, but that's a very fascinating dream.
Yeah. Yeah, it's wild.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
I was just about to bring up. Have you ever seen I think it was on Netflix, series Watchmen? Now, there's a Watchmen movie, but this is separate from that. This is
I
a
have it was an HBO thing.
yes, yes,
I'm
exactly. It
familiar
was
with it, but I didn't watch the series.
Okay.
I read the graphic novel and I watched the movie, but I didn't watch the series.
Squid Falls were a big part of that, so I'll just leave
Interesting.
that hanging there. It's worth seeing. If you ever get a chance, it's really well done and it's fascinating.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's 2 thumbs up for that. Watchmen on HBO, the series, yes.
Yes, awesome. That is a hefty drink you've got there, buddy.
Oh, yeah, I try not to get up too often, so I got the, Quick Mart, 64 ouncer there, so I
Heck
just
yeah.
keep
Heck
my
yeah.
keep my throat moist. Um, so I had something here, that seemed definitely to fit the odd category. England, I mean, Britain, the UK,
Mhm.
isn't that big
Not really.
geographically. It could easily fit within many of our states.
Sure.
And they have a significant population. They don't have the kind of deep wilderness that we do in America. Um, they have no, you know, national forests like we do. They don't have a great empty area anywhere. They're a fairly small group of islands. Yet they seem to have things appear that can't really be there, but yet people see them. You know? And in the spring of this year, there was something definitely not human stalking rural. They do have rural areas, but they're like, you know, farming areas and a limited amount of woods. They haven't had really wild animals in centuries. The
Yeah.
last bear, I believe, was killed in Britain in like 1200. Okay, it's that long ago. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
it's thoroughly domesticated. They have tree covered areas, but they don't have the kind of deep wilderness like we have in Montana or Idaho or
Yeah.
you know Mojave Desert or Alaska. They don't have anything like that, and yet people were seeing what they described as a goat man in the area of Northamptonshire at night. Multiple people were reported seeing a goat man, which I don't need to mention resembles the entity Pan
Sure.
that people have. There's a lot of Pan things going on right now, you
Yeah,
know.
absolutely. I don't think it's
In
by accident.
Oh no, I think something large is happening there. Almost like, and we're just speculating here. We're just some people talking. Um, I think that perhaps the entity Pan from the Greco-Roman era may be re-entering our reality. That perhaps those gods were there, and when it's kind of like the observer effect in quantum physics. And again, this is wild speculation, but I'll wildly speculate for a moment that if certain entities don't receive enough attention, if people stop believing in them, then they stop being able to interact with our physical world as much. And as the pagan deities were no longer revered, they kind of disappeared from the scene. They didn't die out because they can't die, but they stopped having an active, interactive physical role in our world. But I think they'd like to come back. And I think people may be assisting them in coming back. And that may be why people are seeing satyrs or the image of Pan in rural Britain when we know perfectly well there's no possible way there could be some kind of goat man that's a physical creature
Right. Right.
living in that area. There wouldn't be a breeding population that wouldn't, by zoologically, that it would not work.
Right.
And that's, however, they do a lot of mystical practices in Britain too.
Sure, absolutely they do. More so, I would say per square foot than anywhere else in the world, just because the history there, the the lineages of all these magical orders and things, ancient, powerful people that had quite an interest in, metaphysical uh, manifestations.
Hmm.
Um, there's a lot of, I don't want to get into all the history of stuff. Like, I know we're precisely looking at history. This is the topic of conversation, but we're current event history. Um, yeah, it's Goatman, man. It's weird, right? Because I think you can blame a lot of the goat things on the satanic panic, and for whatever reason, them deciding, goat is the representative of Satan, and that everything it's weird is evil and is the devil. And so then goats became this, like, I don't know, feared creature. And so it gets entered into the zeitgeist, and
Hmm.
people that are in these situations that interact with whatever the whole energy is, whatever the field is, they see these representations presenting themselves as goats or goat men. And it's weird to me because I'm gonna go to Hellier for a second, and
Oh,
the
yes.
Amy story in Somerset, right?
Hmm.
She's staying in a camper, right, with her boyfriend, and I don't want to be too graphic here. Obviously, they're a couple, they're alone in the woods, they're probably doing a little fornication, right? And so then they manifest this experience. And I don't think that's coincidence. I think that looking into sex magic and the energy that is released from people who are in the process of having sex, does it opens up sort of a gateway sometimes, just depending on, like, I don't want to say the weather, but like depending on the stars, the weather, whatever. And locally where I live, the last job I had before the job I have now, which was like 10 years ago, um, the guy who was taking my place, I was training him, and we were just shooting the breeze one night, and I was like, hey, you ever have anything weird happen? He's like, well, whenever my wife and I were dating, we were parked, and he told me this place, like out by this woods, on this lane, and we were making out, and things were getting kind of heavy, and she stopped suddenly because she saw something outside the window of the car, and I looked out, and there was a goat man walking towards our car, and whenever I noticed him, he noticed me, and he disappeared.
Wow.
And it's like that sexual energy just creates the I don't know, creates the portal, creates the doorway or whatever for this manifestation to come in. And I love when it happens to be a goat man. So,
And there's a lot of different angles to that. Um, some people have suggested that spirits really miss being in physical form and being able to engage in the pleasures of the flesh,
mhm,
and that therefore are attracted to people, humans who can do those things,
yeah,
and that draws them, which makes a certain kind of sense to me.
sure.
That's and that covers a lot of different phenomena. Um, Whitley Strieber came out this year with a new book that I have not had a chance to. I just haven't gotten to it. I've got a backlog of stuff. You know how it goes. Um,
Absolutely, I do.
but he was suggesting that the Greys may be. I believe his book is called A New World. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's similar to that at least. I'm sure a simple Google search would do it, but I'm
Sure.
doing stuff anyway. Um, but yes, he was suggesting that the Greys may be similar to the Buddhist belief in hungry ghosts
Yeah.
and the souls of the departed who aren't ready to depart because they like wine, women, and song. They like eating and they like having sex and they like being human,
Yeah.
and so they don't move on, and that they hang around and are attracted by people doing the things that they'd like to do, and that interests me.
Yeah.
That
Josh
makes
Cutchin has
some
talked about that very thing.
indeed, yes,
And
and that
I think they're
go
not
ahead.
wrong.
Uh-huh. There's a real attractant there. Now,
Mhm.
whether they can ever satisfy that desire without a physical body, I don't know. It may be more of a moth to flame type of thing that just draws them in.
Yeah.
Or
Man. I don't know because I think I've experimented a lot with astral projection, lucid dreaming, things of that nature. And without being graphic whatsoever, I've had an encounter uh, with my consciousness outside of my physical body where I don't even remember who or what it was that I was interacting with, but I my physical body enjoyed it to a point where I woke up after and thought, "Oh man, I can't believe that just happened." And I think you know where I'm going with that without
Oh yeah,
being
no, yes, yes,
uh,
I've had health class.
yes.
Yes.
So like maybe, maybe not. I mean,
Hmm.
it's a there's a lot of things that one can partake in outside of the physical body, with experimentation and astral projection. So, and to say that that's a separate thing from our physical reality intruding onto that plane of existence versus that plane of existence intruding into our physical reality, I would say that there are rules in place that are very similar.
Hmm. That is fascinating. Um, when I was living in a certain house, this is a few years ago, it was over a decade ago. Both I and my wife experienced the phenomena of you're laying in bed alone, and we worked different shifts, so we weren't frequently we were sleeping by ourselves. And even when we were together, we'd still experience the phenomena of something climbing into bed with you.
Hmm.
And you can tell, you can feel in the mattress that something, there's nobody there. I mean, that you can visually see. There's nothing that you can touch, but like a weight entered the bed.
Yeah.
And we both experienced intrusive and unwanted sexual dreams
Mm,
that were very weird and that seemed so realistic.
yeah.
And, you know, and it was not pleasant. This was not enjoyable because neither of us was seeking it out.
Sure.
It was something coming to us. And whether it was the same thing coming to her that was coming to me, because she perceived a male presence and I perceived female presence.
Mm,
But it was, that happened and it happened repeatedly.
that's
Now,
really crazy, man.
yeah. And once we left that place, it never happened again. So take that for what it's worth.
Wow.
I think that there was something that was at least trying to have an encounter with us and enjoy our energy or what have you. And it seemed to be localized to that house.
It's
So that's,
bizarre because if it was just one of you,
mhm,
you could write it off, but with both
mhm.
of you experiencing the same thing, that's something, man. That's substantial.
Yes. And this was not once or twice. This was like dozens of times. Not always, to the maximum, but the feeling of somebody climbing in bed with you was just unnerving.
Totally unnerving.
And
Yeah.
that happened dozens of times.
Yeah.
And same with the dreams. I mean, that happened multiple, multiple times for both of us. Very, very weird. And only in that house. And we moved and we moved again and never happened. Just stayed
Wow.
there. So I don't,
Wow.
I don't know. You tell me. I don't know what that means, but it probably means something.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild. I had not heard that story from you yet.
Yes, yeah. It's not something I lead with because
No, of course not.
it's a little awkward to talk about because
Oh, yeah.
in my mind beautiful women would appear, but I'd wake up and feel like guilt ridden, like I just cheated on my wife. Wait a minute, where am I? I'm in my own bed. Have I gone
Yeah,
anywhere? No, no, that didn't happen. But it was repeated and it connected with the people climbing into bed. And it was a weird thing.
that's
That and the
wild.
feeling of being watched that was like you could cut it with a knife. Like sometimes I would literally have to turn on the light just to make sure there's nobody else in the room because it
Yeah,
was just
I've been there.
intense. Yes. You know, and it was definitely something coming from outside, but I don't know what that was about.
Yeah.
Um,
I can't imagine living in that situation, man, like
that was, and it was one of those. one of those things that we're glad that didn't follow after us. You know?
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
um,
Wow.
to totally change the subject, if you
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
mind,
Yeah, yeah.
um, just to
Please.
shift gears completely. Um, at the end of February in this year, there was a study. Well, they attempted to do a study, and let me see who are the scientists involved in this. Um, Scientists tracking Australian magpies discovered something startling about their new behavior. They put tracking devices on the magpies, and within 10 minutes, the magpies were assisting each other in taking them off. And it was a higher level of intelligence than they expected from birds, and a higher degree of cooperation. And they didn't want to be tracked. And so they helped each other remove the tracking devices and just left them there and flew away.
Yeah, man.
Now that's
That's
an
something.
interesting, we've learned a lot this year about the cognitive abilities of birds, particularly crows,
Yeah.
and that crows are essentially as intelligent as young children. Um, they do, like, they can be taught to do math and stuff.
Mhm.
It's just a strange thing. It's something that happened. Eh,
They'll trade things with humans. If you give
oh
them food,
yes,
they'll bring you a little shiny trinket that they think we might find, encouraging to continue that behavior. It's like they think they're training us.
yes.
And like
Who's
these
training
birds
who?
aren't dumb. Yeah,
Oh no.
absolutely.
And when you think about the significance of crows and ravens in mythology all over the world, that seems like we've only scratched the surface of the surface there.
Do you think that that is an artifact of lost discovery that, eons ago people knew that these birds were smart, but they attributed it to, interaction with some sort of a deity or metaphysical thing, but they knew that they were smart, but they chalked it up to a religious point of view, much like tornadoes being the breath of dragons or whatever,
Mhm.
all these different things that we know now have a scientific explanation.
Mhm.
But and that information became lost because of how it was attributed, and it didn't seem very pertinent to daily life that birds are smart. Um, do you think it's that, or do you think it's the other way around that we have sort of manifested this intelligence into these birds because of our religious beliefs in ancient times?
I honestly tend to go with the former, that we have it's a memory of things we used to know, that science we used to have.
Yeah,
Um, we're going to get dragged into Graham Hancock's Ancient Apocalypse any minute here.
that was a really good series, by the way.
Oh yes, love it. And I will defend it. That's the hill I'm willing to die on. That's fine.
Yep.
Um, but yes, I think we have a residual memory that the crows and the ravens are intelligent. That we've learned that we used to know a lot more about that, and that's why they sit on Odin's shoulder,
Mhm.
and that's why Raven was a god to some of the Native Americans,
Yep.
and things like that around the world. That we have a memory of that. And if I can digress a little, there's a persistent and widespread um, legendary belief in a large, massive bird that is very wise and very powerful.
The Garuda.
And precisely, I was blanking on what they call it. Yes, in India, that's why I was talking a
Yeah.
little slow. Think. What is that thing called? The Garuda, exactly. What John Keel wanted to call the Mothman prophecies, the year of the Garuda.
Yep.
Um, and that matches the legends of the Thunderbird in Native America
Yep.
and of Raven, and you know this massive bird that is intelligent and godlike, you might say, with a small g. And that, in my mind, and take it for what it's worth, but we were finding more and more, not me, but people who study this stuff are finding more and more that the dinosaurs were not just reptiles, that they had reptile features, but they were also more bird like than we used to think. When
Yeah.
I was growing up, we were taught they were just like alligators and crocodiles,
Hmm.
that they were straight reptiles. And now we've learned no, they were more like birds, huge birds. And if if way back dinosaurs had ever evolved into intelligence, maybe there was an intelligent bird-like creature, that very intelligent bird-like creature that we might have some residual memory of.
Yeah.
And that doesn't seem, it seems very speculative, but it doesn't seem crazy to me at all. I mean,
It
it
doesn't
seems
seem
like,
crazy. No, absolutely
yeah,
not.
you know.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by the Thunderbird myths from Native Americans, and going back to my area here, 30 minutes from me, just south of the mound that I mentioned earlier. There is, it's called the little town called Miram, Indiana, and there's a big bluff along the Wabash River on the Indiana side, and on that bluff there is a pictograph of a thunderbird, and it's not as famous or well documented as the one over by Alton, Illinois, over on the west side of the state. Um, but it's known. I mean, it's not something that's like a secret really or anything like that. So I've always had, because of that connection, I've always been fascinated by these Thunderbird stories. And even into relatively modern times, these giant birds will just appear all over the place. I talked to Stan Gordon last year for Hair Raising Horror Week, and we talked about Thunderbirds extensively, and he had just received a report of an encounter with one the day before we had talked.
Wow.
So it's still a thing that happens. It just doesn't happen a lot, but it still does happen. These gigantic birds that just come out of nowhere. And it doesn't make any sense from a scientific standpoint that these giant birds would be able to live anywhere at this point in our society, because we deforest everything. There's people everywhere in the United States. You know what I mean? Where are these things eating? Where are they sleeping that they go unnoticed?
We count the number of bald eagles that we have in a state.
Exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
something the size of a plane could not just nest somewhere and not be noticed.
Right.
But yet people do see that, and they do see that regularly.
Hmm.
And they'd have to eat, and they'd have to have young and hatch eggs and all sorts of things, but they appear for a while and then they're gone.
Yeah.
And we have a place in Wisconsin called Devil's Lake, which has both the iconography of the thunderbird and these creatures that are a panther crossed with a water serpent,
Hmm.
and in the same lake. And there's a legend. This is the Ho Chunk Nation. People have this legend of a ongoing war between the Thunderbirds, who are generally seen as being more pro-human, and that's some non-judgmental talk there.
Very
More
well executed.
pro-human, and the um like the water panthers that are anti-human, that will lure people to their death or take them to the bottom of the lake where there's a portal to the underworld.
Yeah.
And there's some very interesting things that go on there too.
Yeah, that is
Yes.
fascinating. But yeah, to go back to the root of all of this, like you had mentioned the dinosaurs being possibly, a lot more bird-like, and proving every day more and more that that's the case. And what if there was this really super intelligent, mentally evolved bird creature back in those days that was able to practice magic in the way that humans practice magic, and created paradigm in which it was able to travel to the future, and that's these interactions that we're having.
That makes a lot of sense to me. The dinosaurs were here so much longer than we've
Oh
been
yeah.
here. And, you know, I don't really believe that whatever wiped them all out. I just, to kill everyone is a lot.
Yeah.
There's usually survivors. And if they did become intelligent, they would know how to survive.
Yeah.
And some would survive by going to outer space, perhaps. Some might survive in underground bunkers and caverns. Some might survive under the ocean. Um, some might survive by being able to go to a different dimension. There might be different ways, but they might not have ever died out. And when I look at, when I look at the Bible and look at the concept of the serpent, that always strikes me as maybe that wasn't, as simple as it sounds. And maybe you have an intelligent being which would have some reptilian components, but also bird-like components, kind of like Quetzalcoatl,
Yeah.
the feathered serpent.
Yeah.
And did beings like that continue to exist? And did they continue to interact with humans, or at least some humans who they taught how to reach out to them, how to communicate, and communicated with them and taught them things like magic and influenced them to a great degree?
Sure.
There's I'm working on a book about this stuff, but it's been a little slow going. But there's something there. I really believe that if you consider the possibility of how long the dinosaurs were here, and it seems like they just would have evolved. Some of them would have evolved intelligence, and I mean, we did it
Yeah.
according to the scientific timeline. We went from like squirrel-sized pre-primates that really were no more intelligent than my dog at best, to what we are today,
Yeah.
launching the space shuttle and everything, in a lot less time than dinosaurs were here.
Yeah.
You know, I, it's speculative, it's conjecture.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. We'll
Yes,
never know for sure.
we'll
But
never
it's
know
not
definitively.
right. Yeah.
We'll
I
never be
mean,
able to prove it. I don't look for, a
it's
Nobel
not
Prize coming out of
no,
it.
but it's not a super unrealistic mental exercise to think about, we know so little. We have these tiny morsels of bits and pieces of facts that we know for sure about these creatures,
Hmm.
but we can't in any way interpret their society, their ecosystems, really,
Hmm.
with what we have. And it's just as speculative as what you and I are talking about. We can't
Absolutely.
prove just because the size of their skull that their brain was this size and it was only capable of doing this. We have no idea.
Oh,
There's
exactly.
no one that can prove that that's the case. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So,
A lot of, and I have a love-hate relationship with archaeology, kind of like I do with NASA. I love that somebody's doing the work. I just, sometimes the blinders are very tiring,
yeah. Yeah, yeah, for sure.
I just, as you're talking about, we don't really know what happened, so people theorize and
Mhm.
then insist it was this. It reminded me of a very funny Calvin and Hobbes cartoon from many years ago, where Calvin's digging in his backyard. When I say Calvin and Hobbes, I'm not being an old man here. You know who I'm talking about, right?
I'm a big fan.
Great, great. So,
Yeah.
sometimes I have to check myself.
No, I love Calvin and Hobbes,
Oh,
man.
yes, great.
Love
So Calvin's digging in his backyard and he finds a Coke bottle and like some old silverware, and he constructs them into a dinosaur, and he proves that dinosaurs lived in his backyard. And it,
them.
it looks like a Coke bottle snout, and it's got forks for arms, and it's he dug up the evidence, and that's what it's got to be,
Yep. Yep,
and
absolutely.
really a lot of paleontology is much more advanced version of that. You're finding pieces of a tooth. You're finding, you know, part of a hand bone structure and extrapolating that into
Mhm.
being an entire species.
Yeah.
And you don't know. It's good work, but it doesn't prove. It's just evidence. It's evidence. It's not proof.
Yeah.
And those are two different things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we've gotten off the topic of birds here quite a bit.
We took that and ran with it.
We could do that forever.
Hmm.
Uh, but going back to the year in review of strangeness
Yes.
here, what else do
Yes.
we have on the docket?
Well, again, now for something completely different. Um, a new theory of the Shroud of Turin came out this year.
Okay.
In
This would have not been on my radar whatsoever.
Yes, it was covered in Fortean Times, and it there's also being this is in this separate but related story. They're doing more DNA testing on the Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin is hot this year for whatever reason. Um, but yes, the new theory is advanced that okay, the previous DNA testing they did said that the Shroud of Turin did not come from the Middle East, and it was no older than the year 1200.
Yeah.
And the person wrapped up in the shroud does not correlate with what would be what the historical Jesus of Nazareth would have looked like. He looks more like a European knight, which would not be what somebody in the Middle East 2,000 years ago would have looked like.
Right.
And they're saying that it may be a different person and that it may be an individual known as the Fisher King who is not, you know, a well-known figure. Um, this involves the Templars, and that it may be a representation of the master of the Templars, Jacques de Molay, who is a revered figure in Freemasonry,
Yeah.
and that may be who was wrapped up in the shroud, and that process may have preserved his image, not through a supernatural process, but
Right.
through a natural process, but that the people who are insisting it's Christ may be completely wrong, and it may be a very different figure, and that's still under development. That's still being researched. At the same time, um, the shroud is being retested, and people are trying to assert that it was from the Middle East 2,000 years ago. So
Of
we'll
course.
see. We'll see what happens in 2023 with the Shroud of Turin, but it's still a live, ongoing mystery,
Sure.
and it's always been fascinating to me. I don't have a solid answer for that, but I don't even have a strong opinion. But it's an interesting icon that continues to draw attention and continues to be investigated. And that will be interesting to me to find out in the future what comes out of that, you know?
Yeah. I remember several years ago watching some special or something on Discovery Channel or History Channel or something, and they had reviewed their testing, that initial round of testing on that, and then I think maybe they tried to debunk it as being like a modern fake. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
To where someone in relatively modern times could have just tried to superimpose an image onto this cloth or whatever. So yeah, I kind of wrote it off after that and didn't even think about it. Not on my radar whatsoever. So I missed that story for sure.
And it keeps popping up. Yes, this is a live, ongoing story as of right now.
You know, I don't want to be negative in any way, but it seems to me that people of uh the Christian faith are always grasping at some piece of physical material that they can say is definitive proof that their religion is the one true religion. And I don't think it'll stop with this. It'll be something else after this if it's proven that it's not the case, you know. There's always going to be that next thing that proves that this is the way, this is the only way, this is all the truth, you know.
There are unfortunately a lot of people, and it does seem to be now, at least in our culture, it seems to be mostly Christians.
Yeah,
I will say in the Middle East, there are some Muslims who do the same thing. And in Israel, there's some Jewish people who do the same thing
sure.
that aren't content to let it be a faith.
Yeah,
That we have to find, if we just find this, that'll prove that we're right.
yeah,
But that's not how it works.
no,
And, at a minimum, if an almighty God wanted everybody to believe this, then it would not be difficult at all to provide proof to everybody that would be indisputable.
right.
So the fact that that hasn't happened tells me that's probably not a high priority of any ultimate higher power.
Yeah, I
You
think
know,
spending all the time and money to try to find that piece of undeniable evidence is kind of missing the point, you know, like
yes, yes,
it shouldn't even you shouldn't be about proving. It should just be if it's true to you and it speaks to you, then you're going to follow it and you'll get out of it what you get out of it. You know,
exactly.
I don't feel like you should have to prove it to anyone.
We can't forensically prove stuff that happened this year. There's no way we're going to be able to prove what happened 2,000 years ago
No,
to
absolutely
a
not.
standard of anything. You know,
Yeah.
um, Scientific proof. We can't even do legal proof. We can't do proof beyond a reasonable doubt. No, we're not going to be able to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're not. We're not going to get the DNA that aha, this is the answer. No, it's
No,
not going to work like
absolutely
that.
not. Yeah. Agreed. What's next, man? What else you got?
Well, if you haven't been watching this, you may be unaware of how big a year the Loch Ness Monster had. Because it was again quite a big year for Nessie. Um, Now they haven't captured it, so sorry for spoiler alert. They do not have it in custody. They don't have great footage that is going to prove this once and for all. But a lot of things did happen with the Loch Ness monster. Um, a credentialed scientist uh, produced a paper that described it as being plausible that, in fact, it was a leftover relic uh, plesiosaur that had adapted to living in fresh water, and that that was a possible thing. Zoologist Charles Paxton made an extensive study of lake and sea monsters and points out and I'm quoting out of here from Fortean Times, out of the 1,452 Nessie sightings which he is aware, only 20% mention a neck of any length. So maybe it is the dinosaur that people describe, and maybe it's something else. As for what the something else could be, there were some great footage of some unusual creatures coming out of Loch Ness, and they were escaped alpacas. The yes, but I can tell you in the picture, man, when you see the picture,
Wet
um,
alpacas, sure.
wet alpacas coming out of
Yeah.
the lake, it looks just like the Loch Ness monster you would expect to look. But they captured the alpacas and took them back to the farm where they live or wherever. But
That's
yes,
tremendous.
that did happen. Um,
I don't know, man. I struggle with it with the Loch Ness monster being a leftover dinosaur just because of how old it would be. Um, and for it to have, you know, just been like the offspring of the offspring of the offspring of the offspring of the offspring, and so far, there would be a concentration of sightings more. You'd have to have a breeding pair over and over and over again, and they would be seen, you would think, for sure. Something that is that big, especially in times when we relied on water to travel, much more than we do now. I don't know. I have a hard time with it.
I think there's on a lot of these things, I think there's more than one thing taking place. That there could be a natural explanation to some of the experiences and a very paranormal explanation to others. Um, some people investigating this have suggested that they might be very large eels,
Hmm.
um, like about 9 feet long. And to me, okay, I mean that's monstrous enough. I don't want to
Right.
encounter that, Um,
Absolutely not.
that would be a monster to me, you
Yeah.
know. But some of the other larger, more they have really searched that lake thoroughly.
Yes, they have.
And, for it to be a physical, regular animal, it's kind of like Bigfoot. It
Hmm.
just doesn't ring true. And I start to think that it's something beyond that.
Yeah.
And that, and not just Loch Ness, but generally, if you've got a big enough lake, you've got a monster,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and that they might be some other type of entity that's manifesting itself in this particular form.
Hmm.
Um, to, seems like I'm changing the subject, but I'm really not. Um, in a more recent story, the chemicals necessary for life have been found on, correct me if I'm wrong, but Enceladus is the moon of Saturn that is covered in ice, but the ice is on the outside, and inside is a vast ocean
Yeah.
that's heated from within, like the same kind of way that the core of our Earth is hot.
Hmm.
Or maybe it isn't, as we talked about Hollow Earth stuff. But
Right. Right.
according to mainstream theory,
Yeah.
there's molten metal in the center of the Earth that warms the waters of Enceladus, so that only the outside is covered in ice.
Hmm.
And people think, a lot of scientists think that that may be a place where life exists. Well, think about that for a minute. What kind of life would exist there in total darkness underwater for millions of years?
Yeah.
It'd be really something.
Yeah.
And,
Absolutely. It'd be absolutely horrifying.
and yes, to be honest. And what if sitting in that environment for eons, it would evolve the same way life evolves here,
Hmm.
but they could never develop technology because our technology all depends on having fire and metal and,
Electricity.
yes, making a hammer to, you know, make a knife and make wire, and
Hmm.
they wouldn't be able to do any of that stuff. So maybe they developed their astral travel.
Yeah.
Maybe they developed their that form of technology and move around in that form. And they would show up in water because their whole world is water,
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point.
And I can't think of Enceladus and ancient creatures that live underwater in total darkness and not get real Lovecraft real quick,
No, absolutely. Yeah.
because that totally sounds like something that would evolve into something very scary,
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
and that might be able to project itself out and interact with people.
Yeah.
And I'm not a ceremonial magician. Um, but the stuff that I've read, there's a strong component of the beings that some people communicate with being aquatic. And distinctively, they are sea creatures who are able to communicate with humans, but that's not their natural environment.
Right.
And
You
that,
know,
go ahead.
I was just going to draw the parallels to Kenneth Grant and,
Yes.
again, the Lovecraftian stuff, but also the parallels to how intelligent we know some of the marine life here on our planet is, dolphins and whales and whatnot. It's
Very intelligent, maybe more
not much
intelligent
of
than
a
we are.
reach. It's not much of a reach to think that that's a possibility.
Hmm. And even octopus,
Oh yeah.
the ones we know are as intelligent as humans. They just don't live long enough to develop it. They
Mm-hmm.
have a very short lifespan, but like if they live 4 years, they're approximately as intelligent. No, some species, not all, but some are as intelligent as like a 4-year-old child,
Yeah.
and that's well, what if some of them lived a lot longer? They
Yeah.
would be a very intelligent being, and that'd be very interesting.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let me see. What else have I got here? Oh, well, of course, and this one I'm sure you've heard of. On July 6th, person or persons unknown blew up the Georgia Guidestones.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that, go ahead, give me your thoughts on that.
Man, I don't. People just won't let us have anything nice, I think is what it boils down to. I think that if you want to get into the moral play of destruction as a form of creation, maybe they thought they were doing something proliferating. I don't know a whole lot about the Georgia Guidestones. I know that there's been a lot of work done. Dr. Future with the Conspiranormal
Yes,
guys
yes.
talked about it a lot, and really all I know is just from him. There's been no independent research whatsoever on my part. But it's really, regardless of what it was, what they were, what remains, still is, whatever. um it's still like one of those points of interest for us weirdos, that I always thought, well, I'll see that someday, and now I won't. So that's really
Yes,
my immediate reaction as well. Now I won't see that.
same here. I disagree, and I watched the whole, Conspiranormal episodes with Dr. Future, and he did a great job of investigative journalism and
Yes.
really digging out who did this and like exposing what it really was,
Hmm.
and that it was very eugenics
Oh yeah.
oriented. And, I'm not for the message they're promoting,
Not at all.
but I don't think it should have been blown up. And I posted a thing when it happened comparing blowing up the Georgia Guidestones to when the Taliban blew up the giant Buddhas that were in Afghanistan.
Yeah, I
That
remember that.
I'm not a Buddhist, but I should be able to see them. You shouldn't wipe them out so nobody can see them,
Yeah.
Um, I don't agree with them, but I'd like a chance to take a look at them and have that experience.
Yeah.
And somebody decided to take that away just on their own decision.
Sure.
And they haven't caught the person, and I don't know how hard they're investigating it. But I think if they do catch somebody, the person who they catch will be amazingly close to the people who built it. You
I have a
know?
feeling you're absolutely right. Yeah, I thought about that. I
Yes,
did.
that it was kind of friendly fire. They didn't understand it, and so when you don't understand something, the answer is to blow it up, I guess.
Yeah. I
But
think the big difference, sorry to interrupt you, but the big
no, go ahead.
difference between this and like blowing up Confederate iconography is the message of Confederate statues that they convey is apparent.
Mhm.
These were monuments built to men who were fighting for the Confederacy. This is what they stood for, and the people believed in it enough that they built these statues or these monuments. But with the Georgia Guidestones, although we have people like Dr. Future who say this is who did it, this is what their message was, and maybe, in all likelihood, they're right. But there's still that sort of mystery to it where it could be something different to somebody else. So there's a big difference between the two things.
Yes, and I would agree, and I would just follow up that the Confederate monuments generally haven't been like destroyed
Sure,
so much as
sure.
taken away and put in a museum
Yeah,
or held in private hands.
yeah,
They're just not put on Main Street anymore.
right.
And a lot of those were built, they weren't built right after the Civil War because the South was under occupation,
Yeah.
and there was no
And totally
way that
ravaged.
you're going to go build a statue of General Lee right after the war ended. No.
No,
But
absolutely not.
they were built at a time when the message was to be that they were sending was one of white supremacy. And we're remembering this colonel that did whatever in the Civil War, but we're really saying we're in charge and that's the way it's going to be. And that's the message of the statue. A
Yeah.
lot of times, not every single time, but a lot of
Sure.
times. And so that should be taken down and put away. But it's a lot different than blowing up something that you're right. That there still is nuance and there still is a mystery there. It's
Mhm.
not, pardon the pun, but written in stone that we don't exactly for sure know that happened.
Were you sitting on that, just waiting to use
No,
that this whole
that
time?
was totally ad libbed. And I apologize in advance. Written in stone, yeah.
Yeah, well done, well done. No, yeah, it's kind of a bummer.
Mhm.
I'm
Though,
not gonna lose any sleep. I haven't yet,
no.
but it's kind of like, eh,
And if Dr. Future's take on it is correct, they'll be rebuilt pretty soon, because they're a major tourist attraction.
sure,
And that was kind of the vibe I got, that people wanted them not because they deeply believed the message, but because, like a lot of local attractions, they bring in money.
yeah,
We definitely believe in that. And so I don't think that story's over. I don't think that story's over at all.
yeah,
Um, In the end of July of this year, July 30th, Nichelle Nichols, who played Lieutenant Uhura on Star Trek, died. Um, I usually wouldn't mention stuff that has to do just exclusively with fiction, but I did want to work this in because there's a fascinating story there. One, I really was a super fan of Nichelle Nichols. Watched the original Star Trek as a kid, and um, yeah, we'll just let it go there. But anyway, she was a great actress, and at one point she was considering, in I believe it was the second season of Star Trek, in leaving the show and leaving acting and going and being an activist full time in the civil rights movement. And Martin Luther King himself came to her and said, "No, you can't leave the show. What you're portraying is exactly the world that we want. Um, what you're doing on TV is more important than anything you could be doing right now. You need to stay on Star Trek." And that story, okay. I did not know that, Dr. Martin Luther King was a Trekkie, but yes, he was a huge fan of the show. And
yeah,
so that fascinated me, and I just had to work that in somehow.
yeah, yeah. Rest in peace.
Yes, yes, indeed. Great actress. And man, I don't think Star Trek would be like even a thing today if it hadn't been for her.
Sure.
And of course, the other actors,
Others as
yes.
well, yeah.
But that team really gelled in a way that made that. There were other shows that nobody remembers or cares about, and that has had a life of its own for the last 60 some years. So
Yeah,
it's pretty amazing.
yeah.
Um, let's see. In August, Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb said a meteorite at the bottom of the ocean may be extraterrestrial technology. And they've been pursuing that since then. Um, he's working with a foundation, which I'm blanking on the name of right now, but they are looking for um, evidence of very physical evidence of extraterrestrial nuts and bolts um, craft that may have landed on the Earth. He came to prominence when he put his name behind the proposition that, I'm not even going to try to mangle the name, but you
Yeah,
know
I
the
was
thing
waiting
I'm
to see
talking
if you
about.
would. I was
No, no,
waiting
no.
to see.
The big cylinder that
Yes.
came flying through our solar system.
Yeah.
That he said that may be alien technology, and took a stand on that.
Yeah, he did.
And yes, and I mean, he's about as credentialed as you can get.
Yeah.
And he thought that might be something another civilization made a non-human one from far away. And that's kind of leads me to digress that I don't believe. I don't even use the term believe. I don't believe in anything. I have some ideas I entertain, and some I think are more likely than others. But I don't like the term believe, because that commits you in a way that I can't really commit to these things.
Sure.
But I don't subscribe, I guess would be a better word, to the extraterrestrial hypothesis explaining most UFO sightings.
Not at all.
But that doesn't mean, to me, that doesn't mean that it explains none of them, or that
Correct. I
there.
totally agree.
I think there could be several things going on at
Hmm.
the same time that get under the umbrella of UFOs or aliens,
Right.
and that some of them could be nuts and bolts um, technology from another planet.
100% agree.
That makes sense to me, that at least a few times that might have happened.
Yeah.
And that like Bigfoot, there could be an undiscovered large primate somewhere that we just haven't found, and when we find it, it'll be a gorilla that adapted to cold climates, and
Sure.
that'll just be it.
Sure.
um, that could exist in some areas. The catch is you'd never see it. Okay, it'd be like in the very wastelands of Siberia, or it'd be like the orang pendek,
Hmm.
the man of the forest in, I think it's the island of Java in
Yes.
Indonesia, where it's in the absolute middle of the jungle and nobody ever sees it.
Yeah.
Um, it couldn't be seen as frequently as it is and be just a physical animal. It wouldn't be seen at places, and we're going to come back to this because there's places that it's just impossible.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's Bigfoot sightings that are so close to Chicago that, come on, no, there is not a like breeding population of large primates that we haven't discovered that's in the Chicago suburbs.
Especially intelligent ones. I mean,
Yes, exactly. There isn't. No, there
yeah.
isn't.
Yeah.
It's But that doesn't mean that there are no physical Bigfoots.
Sure.
In this same way, I think most UFO sightings, the ones that aren't misperceptions of something else,
Hmm.
but most UFO encounters where you actually have an experience are not physical
Yep.
in the way we think of physical, like this table I'm tapping on.
Right.
Um, there's something else, and there's a spiritual component, and I don't, I don't have the answers for this, but they're not some other species, NASA, putting a craft together and flying it to our planet and then landing and walking around looking for soil samples.
Right.
That's not really what's happening.
Right. But it doesn't mean that that doesn't also happen. I totally agree.
Exactly,
The
exactly.
the thought of an extraterrestrial craft crashing into one of our oceans immediately takes me to the movie Pandorum, where you spend the entire movie, the majority of the movie, aboard this ship where people are losing their minds. They don't know what's going on. And at the end, you find, spoiler alert, you find that the ship had arrived at its destination already and it had crashed into this water. And people had lost their minds, started killing each other, all this stuff. And then people are waking up at different stages and of this catastrophe. And definitely recommend the movie for sure. But it reminds me of that. And I think about us stupid monkeys thinking that we know everything about space travel and launching ourselves, jettisoning ourselves into space. And we have found a planet that we're going to go investigate because it could be the next Earth, and we want to go there and we want to see what's there. And we get there, but we are so stupid that we crash into the ocean and we never know. And, I think that that's totally plausible that another civilization could do the same thing that has a bigger ego than they have a brain. And I just think that it's not unrealistic. Whether there's a basis to assume that this exact event, this item is that, I have no idea. But it's plausible that it is. I mean, sure.
Hmm. And that I will not let go. I can't pry my fingers off the idea that maybe they do have a ship that they found crashed sometime, and that it's in some lab somewhere,
Oh yeah,
some vault somewhere. No, that's not the common thing that people experience. But
right,
that doesn't mean it couldn't have happened once or
right,
twice.
yeah,
You know, that
absolutely,
makes a lot of sense to me.
yeah.
Um, to totally um, shift gears, and I've been promising to tell you about this the
Oh,
last
I'm
time we
waiting.
talked, and
I'm waiting.
we never got to it. In August, a dog named Abby, a 13-year-old lost dog, she was reported missing 2 months earlier, was found by cavers, people who have all the gear and expertise to explore cavern systems. They weren't looking for the dog, they're just exploring a cavern in Missouri. And they found 500 feet underground this dog. And she was alive. And other than not having been fed in a while, was fine. And they carefully brought her back to the surface, and she received medical treatment and is returned to her family and is apparently doing fine.
That's so crazy.
It begs the question, how the hell did a dog get 500 feet under the ground in
Yeah,
this cave system that it takes a lot of equipment and training and knowledge to just navigate?
yeah,
Of course, the common explanation was she was washed there by floodwaters. Maybe. Yeah, maybe she
maybe.
was. And somehow didn't drown in being washed 500 feet underwater.
Yeah,
I mean, underground. And, I don't know the answer,
I
but
don't either, but that's bizarre.
a hell of a lot of things jump out at me. And some of them involve Hellier. You
Yeah,
know?
I immediately was thinking that as well. But I'll tell you the other thing I was thinking
Go ahead.
about, and this is exclusive content right here. My one of my supervisors at work has family near Somerset, and apparently part of his family owns this land that has a cave in it, and they wanted to know like how deep this cave went, but they're not cavers or anything like that. So they put a chicken in this cave, and they like scoped it out, and where they had people all over the place like looking for this chicken, see where it was going to come out at. It came out like over a mile away, and from a different, a different cave. So I thought about that too. I thought about the chicken in the cave, sort of like being sent in as a probe, like, where will
It
you
came out.
come back?
It
And
came
it
out
did.
on its own.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. Wow. So the goblins didn't get it, basically.
No, not that time. Not that time.
Because that's the first thing I thought of is something came out of the cave and took this dog.
Yeah, yeah,
And then I don't know why they would leave it there and not eat it or whatever they're going to do. I don't know. But yeah, it was absolutely fascinating. And there is so much under the ground that we don't think of and don't acknowledge. Some of it is natural, like the cavern system you described.
mhm,
Some of it is man made, like
yeah,
mines that when they ran dry, they just like boarded them up and the hell with it. You know,
yeah,
some of them were government operations during the Cold War.
yep,
And the thing about you know, well funded military operations, they don't tend to end just because the Cold War happens to be over. We can always come up with a reason why we need a bunch of tunnels under the ground,
yeah. I
you
mean,
know. And if somebody's getting funding for this, they probably want that to continue.
no, Elon
And
Musk has that boring company,
there you go. There's
you know?
another. Uh-huh, uh-huh. People are interested in doing things under the ground.
Yeah.
And I don't think we know, even those of us, you and I, and others who are interested in this stuff, don't know a fraction of what's really going on down there.
Oh, absolutely not.
A
I
couple,
wonder about the jurisdiction of laws underground. Um, are you upheld by the state laws in which you are tunneling? Like,
that's a very good question.
do things need to be reported in a certain way? Probably not. If no one knows that you're there, do you have to report people being murdered or? uh, OSHA violations and things of that nature. You know what I mean? Like, is it all swept under the rug?
That's a good question. I can tell you this. Um, Having just touched upon it in law school, just because you own property on the surface doesn't mean you own the mineral rights directly beneath your house.
Yeah.
Even if your house is paid off and is all yours, you you can't stop people from mining underneath your house.
That's so
It,
wild too.
which is as crazy as it sounds, yes. Um, just like you can't stop everything above a certain height, it doesn't belong to you anymore.
Right.
Okay, and that can become, well. There's a situation now the state escapes me where an underground mine caught on fire, and it's been on fire for some ridiculously long
Yeah, I
time,
don't
like over
remember the state.
20 years.
The town is Centralia, but I don't remember the state because I thought that it was Centralia, Illinois when I first read about it, and it's not. It's another state, but it's Centralia something.
Huh. And yes, and that wasn't dealt with the way that any of the property owners would like, but they don't have control because it belongs to a company, or it doesn't belong to the people who live atop of it,
Right.
which is not common sense. But frequently, the law and common sense have nothing to do with each
Nothing
other.
whatsoever. Yeah.
They're not even on speaking terms, you know.
Yeah. So anyway, the dog is fine, huh? And
Dog's fine. Yes.
hasn't murdered the people in the house, the owners, or anything like that. It's not uh,
I
uh
presume
get
that would have made the news.
get topical and say it's a skinwalker that's pretending to be a dog that it saw one time in a cave that it ate. Um, you know?
All the weirder things that could have happened. As far as I know, the dog is just back with its family.
Yeah.
Um, which
Really. I mean,
it seems like, yes, that there are a lot of weird possibilities that could have happened there, but as far as I know, it has a happy ending.
okay. Well,
So I haven't dug any deeper than that.
yeah. Yeah. Man, you're full of the puns tonight. You
Dug
haven't
any
dug any
deeper?
deeper than a
Yes, yes, yes.
500 foot below the surface dog.
Yes,
You know,
indeed.
that's awesome.
um, Thanks. Um, to totally change the subject, because that's what we're kind of doing tonight. We're
Yeah,
just
yeah.
picking up stories that have maybe not gotten as much attention over the last year. Um, there are in the fall there became increasing reports of the character or entity Loab appearing in AI art.
Yeah.
You've heard of this one?
Yes, I have heard of this one for
It,
sure. Yeah.
and that is a disturbing looking image that keeps coming up.
Yeah.
And I don't know what that is,
Uh,
but it's not anything I want to mess with. I know that much. And it seems to show up kind of on its own, like it may have a life of its own.
yeah. Isn't that scary?
Yes, it is. Um, though I think it's almost inevitable that if AI is real, and that's kind of a debate, is artificial intelligence real intelligence, or is it just computer code mimicking what humans want to see as intelligent?
Yeah.
Um, and I don't. That's not a quick and easy thing you're going to be able to answer.
Absolutely
Nobody
not.
is, you know.
Yeah.
Um, the Turing test, where, correct me if I'm wrong, if for AI to pass the Turing test, you would not be able to tell whether you were talking with a human or talking with an AI.
Correct.
But is that really relevant? Is that really the key, you know, finish line? Because, it could be written just to mimic human speech
Yeah.
in a way that, we'd find convincing, but wouldn't really be an intelligence in and of itself.
Yeah. I think for me personally, doesn't matter. I mean, it depends on the application of the AI, right?
Mhm.
If it's used for customer service phones to answer, what's my balance? So this is your balance. Like, we probably interact with AI and have been for the last decade more than we will ever know already. You know
Oh,
what I
I've had
mean?
so many frustrating interactions with the Walgreens pharmacy
There you
AI
go.
that, and sometimes if I could just talk to an actual living person,
Yeah,
this can be resolved in no time.
sure,
But that
sure.
doesn't happen. Yeah,
Yeah.
until
So,
yeah.
but going back to what you said, like, if it's indistinguishable, which I don't think we've gotten to that point yet, based on my interactions with AI personally, then it depends on the application whether it matters or not. I think we're not going to be under the rule of an AI overlord, I don't think, in our lifetime. Um, and when we say AI art generators and things like that, I think it's misleading to a degree, because it's not. It's very harnessed and very pointed at what it's doing. It's not just sitting there daydreaming and thinking, on its own. You're prompting it to give you a result that's essentially randomness and slight machine learning, just to be able to recognize what it is that you're saying. Um, but it's still this low whatever, however you want to pronounce it. It is creepy and unsettling. But it's like this emergence, and you put it into the world. It's like magic in a way. It's like you make something manifest. Somebody did it one time, and 300,072 interactions with this AI art generator, it picked up another time, and then it picked up another time, and it became more and more frequent and more and more frequent, and then people talked about it, and then it becomes even more frequent because then people are searching for this in the AI art, and it becomes even more of a snowball and more of a snowball until it's just emergent all the time. you know um, it's not unlike just Google searches returning popularity results based on keywords. It's very much similar to that. So it coming back and more frequency, to me, it makes sense that it would. Uh,
Yes, I
but
could see
because
that
of the
angle. Yes.
novelty of this exact thing, it gets the attention. You know what I mean? Because it is creepy that it would just pop up once and then pop up again. But yeah, it's fascinating to me. I'm following it. I'm following AI art generation because there's a lot of controversy with it. Um,
I have a strange reaction to it myself that most AI art I can't really look right at without feeling like kind of nauseous and uncomfortable.
it's weird.
And well, I mentioned it to I don't know if you know Barbara Fisher from 6 Degrees of John Keel. She posts a lot of AI art, and I mentioned it to her, and she said, "Oh, that was not the first time she'd heard of that. That
No,
was
I've heard of it
actually,
a lot.
yeah." It just, no, it just disturbs me. It's just off.
It's like the uncanny valley thing a little bit.
Yes,
You know.
yes, yeah. So I don't really deal with it very much because it repulses me at some level. That's not, it's the image itself isn't like blood and guts or
Right.
you know something disgusting. It's just a picture, but I just really have an aversion to it that goes beyond what I can exactly put my finger on.
Yeah. Yeah.
What I,
That's weird. I mean, I've done some, and I posted a tarot card on Instagram not that long ago that was actually AI tarot card. I'm gonna see if I can find it
oh
while
yeah, that'd be great. Yeah.
I can share it on the screen. I'm gonna be able to see it while we're talking about it on your podcast.
Hmm.
But we can get the reaction to it. I don't remember exactly when I posted it, but it hasn't been too long ago. But it looks like a real tarot card until you start to like really examine it. And I thought, this is fascinating, like this is where this is going to be going. We're really in the infancy of it though too. It's
Oh
like
yes.
what it will become. I mean, who knows where it will go? But I don't see it right now, unfortunately.
Hmm.
But
That's
oh,
an
there it is.
interesting idea. Okay.
There it is. There it is. I'm gonna share this.
And that kind of, let me see this pop. Oh, wow. Now, see, that doesn't bother me.
But it is
It's
AI generated.
fascinating. Yeah. Wow. That is really one. It's just a fascinating picture,
Hmm.
and you look at it and you see more and more things,
Yeah.
and wow, that is really interesting.
Yeah, I thought so.
Um, I'm just wow. That leads me into the. I think we've just scratched the surface of the AI and generally computerized versions of divination,
Yeah.
and that probably has a large future,
Yeah, absolutely.
and that I'm totally blanking on the name of the guy who wrote it because he wrote it. Oh, this is a couple decades ago, but necromancer. That when the internet was fully developed, that Loa spirits, that essentially voodoo entities would live in the internet,
Mm.
and oh, come on, who's the guy that it's right there. He's a very famous author, and now but he was kind of the founder of cyberpunk. Um, that and that people are interacting with these spirits through technology,
Yeah.
and that Gibson, William Gibson,
Okay.
wrote that, and in that novel and series, there are spirits that live completely in the internet, and they interact with people, and they do things, they take action, that they don't need physical bodies to interact electronically, and that makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
um, and I think that if AI is real intelligence and ever develops to a certain level, then spirits would be able to incarnate in it and interact with us through that means. And I mean, that would be only one more step in a series of steps that we've been following since, well, really all of human history, because we've been doing some form of necromancy since probably before we were fully human.
Yeah.
And as technology developed, um, people used it to contact the spirits.
Yeah.
I recently had a chance to interview a spiritualist minister.
Don't
Um,
spoil it for me. I haven't finished it yet. I was listening to it earlier today.
okay, okay. Oh man, it's not to toot my own horn. She's really great. Okay, I just
Sure.
sat there and asked some questions, but it was very interesting,
Yeah.
and we didn't dwell on technology, but I don't think I'm giving too much away when I say that when the Fox sisters began communicating with the spirit through taps,
Hmm.
that was the same era where the telegraph was the highest level of technology.
Absolutely.
Later, both Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla worked on, apparently unsuccessfully, worked on a phone to talk to spirits.
Yep.
And since then, we've had, EVPs and spirit boxes, and the technology keeps coming. And I think that eventually we will definitely have AI spirit contact. And I don't know what that'll be like. And I don't know if you'll be able to tell if it's real or not.
Yeah.
But it seems like the way things are going to me.
I have thought about this a lot. And we've just based on our interactions, you probably have surmised that I question my spirituality a lot, and I think about a lot of different things. We've talked about several of them.
Oh yes.
My latest sort of existential crisis of thinking was everything that we interpret as our reality is cyclical, and we will attain a god status eventually, and it's
Mm.
this building over and over again, and we reach this pinnacle and we create a reality as that level of power. Okay, so when we start this new reality, it starts all over again, and we start at the bottom and we work our way back up and we attain that status again, and then over and over and over and over and over. And I think we're getting higher and higher and higher and closer to that singularity because things like this, where we are creating micro realities, I like to think of it as there's the macro reality, there's existence, right? And then there's micro realities within that, including the internet. We have created, uh, like you're just talking about, like there's now the technology that exists to create artificial intelligence within reality. And what will be the next leap from that? Will we be transferring consciousness into non-physical and other physical technological creations? Like, will we be able to transfer our consciousness into a robot body, for example, to get really like primitive with the idea? But it'll be something beyond that, I think. So within the next 1,000 years, I don't think it's altogether unlikely that we're doing something like that, and that is really it's mind breaking to think about. But look at how fast our abilities have grown over the last even decade. But you go 50 years, even how fast technology has moved, and it just continues to move faster and faster and faster. It's a snowball rolling downhill, and we're going to get there really fast, and it's going to be just terrifying to think about, uh, but it's fascinating at the same time. And I think that we are following this path, and we're just completing the cycle again, and we'll get to the pinnacle, and boom, all of a sudden humanity has achieved god status, and now there's a new infancy again. And I think this is a stepping stone in that.
Wow, that is really interesting. That wow, yes, that is something that is food for thought, indeed, my friend. Wow.
Probably poorly executed
No, no,
and
no.
in presentation, but I
Chew on
think
that
that
one
the
for a
thought is
while.
there.
Yes, no, that's fascinating.
And it goes back to like what you're saying with the the tapping and the telegraph, and then the telephone, and then the radio, and then the internet, and then what comes next, and what comes next, and what comes next, and how far does it go before we do become God?
Mhm.
You know?
Exactly, it change our essential nature into something else.
Yeah.
We no longer reincarnate, or we just if we didn't die, like, and even die is maybe the wrong word. If we kept the same physical vessel for an unlimited period of time with all our memories intact, we'd be so far beyond where we are now that it would be godlike,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that there's a whole lot there with the Garden of Eden and the Tree of Life and Tree of Knowledge and the Tower of Babel and a tower into the sky. And was that really a space program? Or there's a lot there.
Hmm.
And how far can we develop if we didn't have the physical limitations of having to start over as an infant every so many years?
Yeah.
If we could just go in a straight line, we would be very different beings.
Yeah.
We would be in a godlike status. That's pretty incredible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's you nature repeats itself in larger and smaller scales
Mhm.
constantly. You look at the life cycle of independent organisms, like in one-celled organisms, and then you multiply it to smaller multi-celled organisms, and then eventually you work your way up to humans, and we have a life cycle We're born, we grow, we learn, we die. We pass on our genetics to the next generation. And technology, I think, it's going to be a bigger and bigger and bigger part of future generations, to where they won't believe ever that people could have existed without it. And it'll be something we can't even fathom right now. We don't have the capacity to imagine, but it's going to be so important, and will change the thinking processes of generations ahead of us, and the capabilities that will exist at the fingertips of the people that will look back on us as cavemen.
Yes, and they will, and the rate of change keeps increasing faster
Mhm.
and faster and faster.
Yeah.
Like the Tofflers wrote about in Future Shock, um, and the sequels to that. The rate of change in our society and in global society has just increased and increased and increased, that it's hard to keep up with, even knowing what's going on in the world
Yeah.
at the present day. I've often thought that we have historians that know what happened in the past. We have futurists who try to predict what's going to happen in the future. But what we really need is a presentorian, somebody,
Presentorian.
somebody who could tell us what the hell's going on right now,
Yeah.
in some specialized field. Like,
Yeah.
break it down for me. What is the state of the art right now? Because in a lot of things, I'll be honest, I don't know. And it's like, I will admit to not knowing that much about cryptocurrency and blockchain, because
Sure.
I just haven't devoted the time to looking it up. And those things didn't even exist a smatter of years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's really hard to keep up with just the flood of information and knowledge that's
Mhm.
going on.
But for the next generation, the things that we struggle to comprehend will be second nature.
Yes, yes. Oh, they'll take it all for granted, yeah.
Yeah.
And think we're a bunch of dumbasses dumping chamber
Exactly.
pots.
Yeah.
Um, though people back then were just as smart. It's just the technology advances
Yeah.
constantly and at
Faster
higher
than the
speed. Yes,
faster than the human mind can learn the rules of it before it changes again. It's
exactly. I don't know how much time we have, but I wanted to throw out one thing that has definitely changed over this year, and that is suddenly space explorations going on.
yeah.
And that shocks the shit out of me, because, like, I grew up with a poster of the astronauts in the moon on my wall,
Yeah.
and then was so disappointed most of my adult life that we didn't do went to the moon 9 times. We could talk about what's fake and what's real another time, but
Yeah. Yeah.
we went to the moon 9 times. If we were lying about it, you don't think the Russians, the Chinese, the French, everybody else would have called us out? No, we went to the moon 9 times, which may or may not match the film that was shown.
Sure.
But we put astronauts on the moon between 1969 and 1979, 9 times. Then we
Mhm.
stopped,
Yep.
and we didn't do that anymore.
Yeah.
Well, this year we started going and doing stuff again with the moon,
Mhm.
and the Artemis project successfully orbited the moon. The Chinese landed something on the moon that collected some samples and things.
Mhm.
Um, India's trying to get to the moon. They launched a robot. It didn't successfully work out completely, but they're working on it. The
Yeah.
moon is suddenly hot again,
Yeah.
and that just begs the question for me: why now? Like, the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, we didn't really do much of anything,
Mhm.
and all of a sudden, it's like space race is on again, and I don't know. I was there some The reasons are undisclosed,
Yeah.
and suddenly all this UAP quasi disclosure stuff starts coming out.
Yeah.
And then we start going back to the moon. And I can't see that there's not some link there, though I don't claim to know what it is.
Can I get really conspiratorial?
Oh, please hit it.
This is just wild thinking out loud, and that's all it is. I don't necessarily even know if I believe this, but I am on record as saying that I believe that we have grown so accustomed to fear that it no longer works as a tool through media for our government to control us with fear. And it's not coincidental that at a time when we are so numb to fear, that all of a sudden the government is wanting to talk about UFOs. And I believe that a false flag event is, this part I do believe, is in the works to wrap up humanity's fear once again, because we've been talking about the UFOs. Now we're going to go back to the moon, and all of a sudden there's going to be violent extraterrestrials coming for us. And we have the technology to make this totally believable now. We will relinquish all of our freedoms to the government and say, protect us at all costs. We'll do whatever you say. And, they have that control again. And I think that's my personal opinion. I don't want that to happen, but I feel like that's what is going to happen. That's what's going to come of this. And I don't believe it for a second, because if these entities, whether they be extraterrestrial or ultra terrestrial, whatever, interplanetary or interplanetary, if they wanted us dead and they wished us harm, we would not exist right now. There are too many documented cases of people seeing these things for eons, that if they wanted us gone, that we would be gone already. The opportunities have presented themselves over and over and over and over again. So I don't think that's really what the case is, but I think that they're laying the groundwork now for that to be a really plausible thing that could happen.
I won't dismiss that for a second. I'm a bit older than you, and so I remember, and you probably know what I'm talking about though, but I remember it in real time. Um, when President Reagan was meeting with Gorbachev and said that we would solve all our problems very quickly if the aliens landed, because then we'd all come together.
Yep.
And there wouldn't be a war with Russia.
Nope.
There wouldn't be a war with China.
Nope.
We'd all cooperate. And because, the creatures are coming.
Yeah.
And that has always stuck in my mind, that maybe he said a little too much too openly, but that was very much a thing that could be done. And we could, not we, but they could fake practically anything these days.
Yeah.
I mean, with the technology we have in Hollywood and hell, just on the internet with deep fake stuff that is only scratching the surface on. Do you remember Max Headroom?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yes.
I mean, I don't remember it, but I know of it. Like,
yes.
You know what I mean? I didn't live through that, but
he had an episode where an evil politician said something and ordered somebody's execution, and they just altered it so he says the complete opposite. And the days of that happening are right around the corner.
Yeah.
I can't even say it hasn't happened.
Sure. Yeah.
And the idea that they couldn't totally fake an alien invasion, no, I think they totally could.
Absolutely.
Now, how people would react to that, I think you make a strong point that in recent years we've had so much fear that we've developed a high tolerance.
Yep.
We just after 9/11 and you name it, many things, we just don't. It doesn't work anymore.
Nope.
You can keep shocking us. We're just okay.
Yeah.
Whatever. But some great event would, maybe bring that reaction and break that tolerance down and get people to do things they otherwise wouldn't do.
Yep.
And now, and this is, we're just speculating here.
Absolutely.
Part of me says maybe that wouldn't be automatically a bad thing. Maybe. And I realize I'm defending some pretty indefensible stuff here.
Yes, you are.
Maybe if we were all frightened of, the creatures coming, we would stop a lot of the nonsense that we're fighting about.
Hmm.
And, you know, we could get over the hump of, maybe having a one world government. And when I say this, I'm losing subscribers as I speak.
Yep.
But just for what it's worth, maybe the idea of a federation of nations that actually work together, kind of like a United States of Earth, um, wouldn't automatically be a bad thing. Maybe we could stop killing each other over imaginary lines
Hmm.
that, don't really exist except in our own minds. They're, a construction that the border's here and will shoot you if your soldiers come across it. Okay, that border is made up. And, maybe something like this would be the only thing it would take to get us to that status.
Yeah, possibly.
I mean, it's not a popular view.
It's
And,
wishful thinking.
and like you said, I'm not even saying that I believe this.
Right.
I'm just speculating. But it just seems to me like if if the 50 states can stick together, if Maine and Alabama and Washington and New York can be in a country together, maybe we could do something with the rest of the world and like agree to not attack each other.
Yeah,
Now, I mean it's a far off it's a dream world, but
it is.
it's something that doesn't mean that'll never happen. And at the risk of sounding like a UFO contactee, which I'm not, um, it's weird when you have to give that disclaimer. But I think that someday in human history we will reach a point where the whole Earth is not divided up the way we are now.
Yeah.
Now that may take a long time,
Or
but
one giant catastrophe.
yeah, or one giant catastrophe, or one giant made up thing that didn't really happen, but it worked.
Hmm.
I, you know, I think someday we will reach that point.
I do too.
Eh,
I think it's
You know,
inevitable, especially if you're
Mhm.
following along with the cyclical God creation thought
Exactly,
experiment that I
exactly,
proposed earlier. You know,
exactly,
those things
hmm
don't matter eventually. When we're all living
hmm
in the internet, borders don't exist.
exactly. What difference does it make then? Yes,
Tribalism just washes away.
yes, and ultimately we'll be able to communicate across languages.
Hmm.
And if we were all united, we could do incredible things,
I totally agree.
you know? And that's kind of the weird part about the Tower of Babel. And when everybody spoke the same language and built a pathway to space, and then allegedly it was God, but it was somebody scrambled the languages and sent people all around the world.
Yeah,
Now that's a fable, I
sure.
understand, but it shows you the power if all of humanity was not fighting each other and somewhat working together. It'd be an incredible future.
Absolutely. We're just so stubborn and egotistical, and we
hmm
all have to be right.
hmm
It's not going to happen right now. But I think that, I mean, you look at the alien contactees of history and the descriptions of these people. They take someone back home. The societies that they live in are all that way. They're all, a commune, so to speak. Like they
hmm
all work together to make their society function. And I think it's a pipe dream at this point. I feel like that we'll definitely never see that. I don't think in our time, but I think that it's inevitable for intelligent society to eventually arrive at that. Like eventually, you're gonna get tired of walking over the dead bodies of your neighbors that you've shot.
hmm
That you're gonna be like, we need a better path here.
Yes, yeah.
You know,
What are what are we spending all our money on? If we didn't spend it all on guns, then,
Yeah.
maybe we could afford a lot of other things that we'd like.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I totally agree. It's too bad that we can't sit here right now and say 2022 was the year of eternal peace on earth. But we'll shoot for
Oh, no.
2023. Let's shoot for next year.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Um, you, how are we doing on time here?
We're at 2 hours and 10 minutes.
All right. All right. Um, I don't have a whole lot more. I do have one thing that I've been noticing. There's been a lot of like kind of a spike in UK Bigfoot sightings. And we kind of touched on this
Yeah,
earlier,
yeah, yeah.
but it's just there's no way that there could be undiscovered primates in the British
Absolutely not.
Isles. That could not
Absolutely not.
happen, okay?
Yeah.
But yet people keep seeing them and reporting them. And, often it's very few people are totally comfortable coming out and saying, I saw this,
Yeah.
especially when you're not in like rural Oregon, but
Right.
you're not far out of London. I mean, it sounds ridiculous. It sounds like
Absolutely it does. Yeah.
you're losing your mind, but yet something does appear to people. And far too often for it just to be, mistaken.
Hmm.
And that, you know, again, there could be somewhere in the world an undiscovered primate, but that's not what we're seeing.
Right.
And I wonder, I have several theories that I entertain at once that, you know, there may be portals and they may wander in accidentally and they may be what is in another timeline is it's the present time, but in a different timeline in a multiverse. And they're just a normal being that, is intelligent, but it lives where we live, but in another side dimension.
Yeah.
And it just the experience may be as weird for them as it is for us.
Oh yeah, I think so. I mean,
I mean,
look at
like, what
some
the
of the
hell?
interactions. Look at some of the interactions where all of a sudden you're in the woods and all of a sudden you see this thing and it throws a rock at you. Like imagine if all of a sudden you're lifted from wherever you are and you find yourself in a totally alien world and there's this weird pale creature looking at you and all you can think to do is defend yourself. You grab a rock because it's right there. It looks heavy. That could do some damage and you throw it. Like I definitely think that. I've always thought that. It seems like a fish out of water on both accounts. You know what I mean?
Yes,
Like you
yes.
both find yourselves in a situation that doesn't make any sense, and you're forced to live through it until it goes away.
Yeah, exactly. That's a good description.
Yeah,
Um, and look, while we usually perceive Sasquatches as being huge and powerful, and why would they be afraid of us? Well, why are we afraid of grays?
yeah,
They're little and diminutive, and it looks like you could just choke one, but they'd scare the hell out of us. Like if one walked in the room right now, I would not fist fight with it. I'd get the hell out of there.
right, yeah,
And that would be probably kind of the same reaction they would have. They suddenly arrive and they're in our world, and who the hell are these things? And what the hell? And
yeah,
then we usually, well, not usually, but sometimes people react to them by shooting at them, and that I think is very counterproductive.
sure,
Well, for one thing, it's never worked. We never got the body. There's many incidents where they seem to be unaffected by that type of thing. There's some people who've said that they did kill one, but when anybody had any follow-up questions, they tend to be very quiet about it
yeah,
because, well, for one, they're probably completely full of crap. Two,
absolutely,
if they actually did that, you might be very careful. They might be another type of human being. You might just have committed murder.
yeah,
So, that's the thing too.
yeah,
I've
yeah,
kind of wondered this as one more hypothesis. they're not that different from humans. I can't recall the name of the family, but you've heard of, they live in Mexico. They, for a while at least, for generations, they were circus performers. And they're
Hmm.
people who have the hair all over their body, all over their
Yeah.
face,
Yeah.
men and women. And
Hmm.
it's just a genetic trait.
Right.
They're, they're human beings just like us. They just have this one gene that's different than ours. And
Hmm.
so they grow hair all over their body. Well, okay. If you had somebody like that and they were larger than average human, like say Shaq, okay, okay. I
No,
thought
yeah.
I tell you, man, if I was Shaquille O'Neal, I would not be able to resist fucking with Bigfooters. I have to
I
make sure
would. I'd
they're
be able to
unarmed.
resist. I'd be afraid that I'd get shot.
That's well. I'm thinking specifically of a certain reality TV show.
Oh, sure.
I
Yeah.
have to go out there and just screw with them a little bit,
Yeah.
but yeah, somebody of that proportions, which are very well within the human range, and if you had that gene to have hair all over your body, well, you'd look just like a Bigfoot,
Yeah.
but you'd be completely a Homo sapien with DNA the same as ours.
Yeah.
And if there was something like that, the last thing we should do is kill it, okay? Because
Absolutely.
you know, but they might be capable of, at least a certain number would be capable of hiding out, and that I try to embrace all the theories at once. That's there could be flesh and blood Bigfoot. At the same time, there could be interdimensional Bigfoot, and there could be spiritual Bigfoot,
Hmm.
and there could be the ghosts of ancient Bigfoot.
Yeah. Yeah.
There could
Yeah.
be a number of things that fall under this umbrella. So that's just my
Yeah.
take on it.
But
Yeah.
there are no physical, like giant hominids living in the wilderness of the UK. So why are there
No,
so many
exactly.
more? You know, and I think we're just getting to that time, man. We're getting to this time where things are starting to pop back up again, like in heavy numbers. And I think because of our ability now to communicate with one another, and because of the stigmatization of these events becoming less and less, that we're going to start getting more and more reports from people all over the world that are encountering things, not just Bigfoot, not just the Loch Ness monster, but everything. And
Oh yes.
what a time
It,
to be alive.
oh yes. It seems like, honestly, this is just my own personal impression based on nothing I can cite. So take it for what it's worth. It seems like the veil is fraying,
Yeah.
and there may be some event that just rips, and suddenly we see things that we haven't seen in a long time. And did people in ancient times actually see these things as real as we see, like a buffalo today?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know.
But that may be ending, and we may be in for a tremendous change.
I think, like I said earlier, I think we're just getting closer and closer to the singularity, man. I think that, we're developing at such a high rate to levels that 3 or 4 generations ago, people didn't think were even possible.
Oh,
You
very
know,
much so. Yes.
and it's so much information going in and out and so fast that I think eventually the system just won't hold and we're going to see everything, and then we get to become God and we do the cycle again. I think that's where I do think that's where we're headed.
Mhm.
I'm sure I'm totally wrong, but it's just an interpretation, I think, of the way that things are right now. I saw a really funny cartoon, not like an animation, but like a printed cartoon a
Mhm.
couple of days ago that made me stop and think a little bit. And it was a little 4-panel cartoon, and now after I've started talking about it, it has totally escaped my mind. Uh, anyway, it was one of those things, like a signpost to me, where I'm like, yep, that's what's happening now. That's the way that it is. I find these things in my life a lot, and I'm sure that you do too, and other people do,
I do
where
sometimes, yes.
you have this theory bouncing around in your head, and then you see some form of evidence of it, and you're like, oh, yeah, shit, there it is. Like maybe I'm
Yeah.
onto something.
Mhm.
And it was just I was thinking about this and that popped up and I'm like, oh, there's another one. And are we manifesting that? Like it goes back to what we had talked about before, with creating our own realities, man, by thought. Thought creates reality. And I think the closer we get to that singularity, the more obvious and fast acting those little signposts are gonna pop up. It's it's wild when you see it.
Yes, it is.
It's
Yes,
really
it
wild.
is.
It's wild. I love it. I love it all. We've had
It
some
is.
terrible things this year, but like there's been some great things this year too.
Absolutely. And I mean, every year has its tragedies, and for as far back as we can go. And so it's important though to look at the good things that happened too. And there
Yeah.
were many.
Yeah.
And to continue to follow the mystery because there's
Absolutely.
you know that's I love the wonder. um some things, it's not like I want to catch Mothman and dissect him or something. No, no,
Right,
no.
right.
I just like I like the story and the experience of people and the speculation of what does this mean.
Yeah, yeah.
That's very, it's an ongoing addiction from which I do not desire to recover.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you, man. We're on this ride together. I think our plane tickets are like row A, 1 and 2. Like I think we're right here. We're on the same plane. We're going to the same spot, and our itineraries may be a little different when we get there. But I think that we share a lot of principles in the way that we think, and I'm just really glad to see people coming together in this field, and it seems like we've, at least from my point of view and from the people that I interact with, we're not attacking each other as much anymore, and maybe it's just because that's the people that I've saddled up with. I don't know, but like we work together well and we share a lot of theories with one another that make us all feel a little less crazy
Yes,
because
indeed.
we'll talk about something and I'll be like, well, this is gonna be totally ridiculous. You'll be like, I understand where you're coming from. Um,
Yes, this
so
this has been a really welcoming community.
absolutely.
That, I mean, you can find other people on Facebook if you like fighting and arguments. They're certainly available, but
Absolutely.
I prefer this here.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. Well, numerology says it's 2 hours and 22 minutes, so I don't think we should push it much longer than that, man. I think you've got to edit all of this and you've got to put this out. I don't have to. I just had the fun part.
Well, it was definitely, hey, it was wonderful to be here. I really
Oh man,
appreciate it.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for reaching out
Oh,
and
no
doing this,
problem.
man. It's been a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to it all weekend.
Cool.
This starts off a 5-day weekend for me. This was like the
Oh, great.
keynote. So like it's only gonna get better from here. So
Right on.
yeah.
A happy New Year to you, by all
Yes, you
means.
too,
Everybody
sir.
listen.
We should do this again next year and see what kind of crazy stuff that we can come up with to review.
Absolutely. I'm sure there will be no shortage of material in 2023.
I can't imagine a world where there was. All right. Yeah, let's wrap this up. I'll email you the audio from this. So just let me know what address you want me to send it to, and we'll make sure that it gets there to you, so you can do with it what you will. Do with thou will.
Well, I plan to just make a long, not long in a bad way, but long in a great way, podcast episode, and everybody can hear our speculations and thoughts, and I think it's going to be an excellent one.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to listening to it and finishing the episode that I'm on right now too. So, yeah, happy New Year to everybody, and we will catch you very soon. Next episode of Paranormal Patio, which finishes up the discussion that Vincent and I have had, will be out on New Year's Eve. So,
Oh,
look
excellent.
forward to that and the conclusion of that. And if you want to listen to the whole thing, you can just go to the weird part and just listen to the whole thing at once. But I wanted to break it up and I wanted to give you time to have that first too. Um, you've been cranking out the episodes, man, and
I've been trying to kind of, be more productive with the podcast. Yes, I
yeah,
have some
great job.
plans with that. Thank you.
Great
Thank
job.
you very much, Jason. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I listened to, I haven't listened to all of your back episodes, but since you and I have been in communication, I've listened to everyone, and like I said, I'm on the one now with this, with the spiritualism, and I think I'm halfway through it or so. So I'll finish it up this weekend for sure. And this going to be the next episode?
Probably yes.
Yeah.
Well, I may sandwich one short solo episode that I did about the War of the Worlds, and
Oh, all right.
yes,
There for it. I'm there for it.
and but other than I may save this for kind of the end, the very end of the year.
Oh, cool. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
yeah, that's kind of my plan. And by the
Awesome.
way, I love your content. I listen to it all the time. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah,
It means a lot. I love to hear that.
yeah,
Sometimes we need to hear that,
oh yes, no, you're doing a great job. Paranormal Patio kicks ass, man. I definitely I love it.
Kind
Became a
words.
Patreon.
Kind words from a kind man, everybody. Vincent Truewell, thank you so much for popping in, and thanks for inviting me to be a part of your show yet again. And anytime that you want to work together in the future, man, just let me know, and if I can do it, I'll be there for you.
Well, thank you so much, Jason. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for the last couple hours of really just stimulating discussion and conversation. It's been
Yeah,
an absolute pleasure. I definitely look forward to doing it in the future.
absolutely, man. Totally
Happy
agree
New
with
Year.
everything that you just said. Happy New Year. Goodbye, everyone. Have a wonderful evening and a wonderful weekend. Drive safe if you're going to be out driving with people celebrating and getting drunk and stupid. If you're going to get out and drink, get somebody to drive you around, please. Fasten your seatbelts and kiss your kids. Good night, everybody.